Coffee. Joel here, and I'm here with another Joel. He is a principal of Gilchrist Connell lawyers. They're a nationwide law firm, specialises in employment law and insurance law. And a question we see often on Finance and Coffee is, I'm thinking about hiring a new employee, or I've just hired someone. How do I go about making sure that everything's set up properly and all of this? And it's a common scenario in the mortgage broking world. And an even more common scenario is contracting and contractors. So we're here today to talk a little bit more about employment versus contracting, how to get set up, and the things you need to know when you are engaging or starting to employ people in your business. So welcome to Joel to Finance and Coffee.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you to the audience.
Cool. Basically, I'm a mortgage broker. I've got a business. I'm getting overloaded with work. I need to hire someone to come on board to represent my business and help me process those deals, go and interview the customers. Where do I start? What do I do?
Sure. Well, it's a question that every fledgling employer has to ask themselves, and the important thing is to get yourself set up properly from the outset. Sure. And not to try to cut corners, because the cutting of corners can expose you to liability either at the time or down the track. The first question you would be asking is, am I going to engage the person as an independent contractor or as an employee? Okay. And from that decision flows all of the rest of the steps you need to take. I think we'll get to whether a person's a contractor or an employee shortly, but after you've made that decision, you need to get the paperwork in place. Yep. So you need to have an employment agreement or an independent contractor agreement. You need to have sought advice from your accountant about superannuation and the like. Even contractors can be entitled to superannuation if they're a deemed worker. Sure. And from there you determine what the rates of pay are that you're going to be paying the person. Let's assume they're an employee. You need to figure out, okay, well, are they going to be covered by a modern award or not? Most likely they would be. Being a mortgage broker, it'd be covered by the Banking, Finance and Insurance Award. Mm-hmm. You need to understand as a small business owner that workplace laws apply to you, even though you are a very small business, even with potentially only one employee. Yeah. You still have to comply with the Fair Work Act, the same as Lynn Fox or NAB or ANZ. Everyone has to comply. Sure. There's no shortcuts, except for unfair dismissal, where you get a bit of breathing space. You need to think about how long a probation period you want to have, understand what the minimum rates of pay are, as I think I mentioned, what other entitlements the employee is entitled to. This all seems really daunting, doesn't it? But in fact, there's some good news. You just go to the Fair Work Ombudsman's website, which is fairwork.gov.au, and have a look. For small business employers, there are handy cheat sheets, little packs you can download, and it'll just tell you what are the steps I need to take. So my first bit of advice is inform yourself, understand what it is you're doing, what your obligations are, how to get it right, and how not to get it wrong.
Absolutely. So as a potential employer, what are some of the benefits of either engaging, or benefits and disadvantages of, for me, if I have to pick, am I hiring a contractor or am I hiring an employee? What are the considerations I need to think of when making that decision?
So you need to think of how much control you want to exert and how much control you want to be entitled to exercise over the worker. We'll just call them the worker. Sure. If it's the case that you want to exercise more control, or you think that you'll need to, then it's more likely the person will be an employee, and so you should employ them. If on the other hand, they're running their own business and you just need bits and pieces from them from time to time, then you're not exerting any kind of control over them really, and it's okay for them to then be engaged as an independent contractor. Okay.
So it's about level of activity and how much control.
Yeah, so if the person's just going to be doing work for you or largely for you, then it's more likely than an employee. Yep. There's a greater degree of flexibility that you get with a contractor because you're not subject to workplace laws, you're not subject to unfair dismissal, and you don't have the same obligations to them. by the same token, though, they have a right to own more of the IP, and it's arguable that IP that they create in the course of doing work for you is going to be owned by them.
Yeah.
They should be entitled, if they're a true contractor, to freely compete with you. You might be able to restrict them from poaching your clients,
Sure.
but that restriction is going to be more limited because of the degree of control. Because one of the key factors the court will look at in deciding is a person a contractor or an employee is how much control the putative employer exercises over that person.
Right. So theoretically then, a contractor, let's say I'm contracting for your mortgage broking business, we might have an agreement where I can't call any of your clients and say, hey, go somewhere else, but I theoretically could still contract other broking business. I could theoretically still find clients myself and do business development for myself that has nothing to do with your business. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And I wouldn't be entitled to say to you, Joel, you have to attend particular meetings at certain times. You have to wear, my badge, or you have to hand out business cards from my mortgage broking company.
Sure.
You need to really be operating as a separate business.
Sure.
It seems to me to be unlikely that anybody who's actually doing work for a mortgage broking company is going to be running their own business. And they might have a separate business that they run on the side, but that doesn't necessarily make them a true contractor for your business or for my business.
Sure.
Because they could also be a part-time employee of my mortgage broking business and have their own business separate to that.
Right. So then, if they're an employee, though, you can absolutely say, you cannot have your own business outside of this that's doing something similar. You cannot work part-time for me and part-time for someone else. Yet as a contractor, they can freely do that.
Yes.
In most cases, or in some cases.
Yeah, they should be able to.
Yeah,
that's right.
So then, what are some of the pitfalls then if you get that decision wrong and you're either exerting too much control over a contractor or not enough control over an employee? What are some of the things that can go wrong if you get that distinction incorrect?
Yeah, well, you can end up in court. The Fair Work Ombudsman can investigate and prosecute you, and you can be liable for a whole range of employment entitlements that you didn't make an allowance for.
Yeah.
So under the Fair Work Act, there's a prohibition on engaging employees as independent contractors. There's certain defences to that, but it's very difficult to establish those if you should have been aware the person was an employee and not a contractor.
Yeah.
Breaches of those workplace laws can expose a business and an individual who's involved in the contravention, like a small business owner, to orders to personally pay pecuniary penalties under the Fair Work Act. The current maximum penalty for a corporation is $63,000 for each contravention, and for an individual it's $12,600 for each contravention. And bear in mind that the contravention of the sham contracting provisions of the Fair Work Act, which prohibit unlawfully engaging people as contractors when they're in truth employees, is just one of the breaches of the Fair Work Act that will flow after engaging somebody as a contractor when they're not.
Yeah.
Other breaches that will flow will be failure to pay correct rates of pay, failure to comply with the banking, finance and insurance award, failure to do things like provide notice of termination, if that's the case, and a range of other breaches, failure to keep pay slips and other records relating to the employment. And each of those breaches exposes you to penalties and exposes your business to penalties. Aside from that, you probably won't have made allowance for any annual leave because the person was engaged as a contractor. You won't have paid them public holiday pay or sick leave. So you become, you're then on the hook for all those entitlements as well.
Sure.
So that's they're the significant pitfalls of engaging somebody as a contractor when in truth they're an employee. And I see it all the time.
Right.
We advise small business and large businesses about their engagement practices, and many of them just get it wrong.
Well, that $63,000 fine for getting that wrong, that's, for those of you out there trying to work out, that's about $10 million of settlements you're going to need to make just to cover that one fine. It's a lot of work, and I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to get your contractors to do that to cover it either. So, if I have legitimately engaged someone as an independent contractor, are there any as a small business owner, apart from that control aspect and the activity aspect, are there any financial differences that I need to be aware of in terms of rates of pay or super or tax withholding or anything like that that's different?
Yeah, so with someone who's truly an independent contractor, let's assume that it is above board and an independent contractor at law, there's no set rates of pay. It's whatever they'll bear, whatever the market will bear. They may be deemed to be a worker for the purposes of superannuation law and workers' compensation law, even if they're not in truth an employee. But once you start getting into that zone, you'd want to be concerned about the employment aspects as well. But it does pay to seek advice from an accountant as to whether or not you might have to pay this person super and consider whether or not you might have to pay workers' compensation for them as well. That is, making premium payments to the workers' compensation insurer. Other than that, it's pretty flexible. The taxation, I'm not a tax lawyer or an accountant, but as I understand it, the tax obligations are really those of the person who's receiving the monies, unless they're not a true contractor, in which case you bear the tax liability as well. But other than that, it's really just whatever arrangements you come to between the parties.
Okay. And then is there any sort of lines as well, especially in the mortgage broking industry, and I'm sure there's a lot of you guys out there who are independent contractors, or you're thinking of hiring someone as an independent contractor. I mean, you were talking before about that level of control. You can't tell the contractor you have to be at a meeting at this time at this place, or what about if they are working for your brand and going out there representing you and your brand? Is there any sort of lines between contracting and franchising in that respect that you've got to be aware of as well?
Well, yeah, I'm not a franchise lawyer, but I think to set up a franchise, you have to properly set up a franchise. If they're just going out there and representing your brand, then they're probably an employee, not a contractor. The important thing, Joel, to remember is that when you engage somebody as either a contractor or an employee, the courts will look past whatever written document you've got between you. They'll look to the true nature of the relationship.
Right. So
you can engage somebody with a beautiful independent contractor agreement written by some fantastic lawyer, and it won't protect you if in truth they're not a contractor, they're an employee. So just to come back to your question, if you've got somebody who's out there representing your brand, I can't see any risk that it slides into a franchise without there being a proper franchise agreement. The person would just be, you can call them a contractor, but in likelihood they're probably an employee.
So it's not just what's on paper. So you and I could agree 100%. Joel is an independent contractor of Joel. Go figure that one out. But in reality, if you're telling me what to do, you're telling me how to advertise, you're telling me that I can only have a deal with your clients, doesn't matter what we've agreed on and signed together. It's irrelevant. It's about what we're actually doing together that determines the relationship, not the contract itself.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, probably the vast majority of independent contractor cases that I run or that I advise on are cases where the person's been engaged on a written document, on a written agreement, which is titled independent contractor, and it's got all the lovely provisions that it needs to have. But in truth, it's the reality of the relationship between the two parties.
So it sounds like if you have got contractors engaged or even employees engaged, or you're thinking about doing it, you really need to take that extra step of just getting an agreement and actually getting some advice. Is that right? Yeah.
So if you're thinking about engaging somebody as an employee, then I think all you need to do is get yourself a decent employment agreement, preferably from an employment lawyer, if not a reputable HR consultant. Don't just pull them off the internet; they're dreadful. Half of them are from the States, just no good at all.
No good.
But so you get yourself an employment agreement, go and figure out your obligations under workplace laws, and away you go. No risk, or low risk, as long as you comply with workplace laws, and any sensible, intelligent person can go and find that information and understand what they need to do. As soon as you start thinking, maybe I'm going to engage somebody as an independent contractor, the alarm bells should be going off everywhere, red flags going up, because the risks are huge, even for a small business and even if it's just one person, because of the potential for those fines that I mentioned and for the liability or the additional payments that you might expose yourself to.
Yeah.
So at that point, not only should you get yourself a good agreement to record the independent contractor relationship, you should also ensure that you get legal advice from an employment lawyer. Don't get the advice from an accountant. With all respect to accountants, I've seen many instances of bad advice from accountants, and don't just get it from a business lawyer or a commercial lawyer, because it's a specialised niche of employment law, and often the commercial advice is still the wrong advice.
Sure.
So get the advice before you engage somebody, because it might cost you $2,000, for example. It's a lot cheaper than being exposed to penalties and also payments.
Cool. So then, if any of our Finance and Coffee members did want to get advice on that, what would you? How could they contact Gilchrist Connell, for example?
All our details are on the internet, but we've also got a really great agreement with you guys that anybody who posts a job ad on the F&C job website, which the job board, which is a pretty cool facility that you guys provide anyway, that they get 15 minutes of complimentary advice from us.
Yep.
Now, it's just advice of a general nature, but it can still point you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a pretty handy service.
Yeah.
So our details are available on the job board as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you are thinking about hiring, make sure you post it with Finance and Coffee. Make sure you give Joel or any of the Gilchrist Connell team a call. Go over your situation, what you're thinking of doing. They'll be able to tell you if you're in dangerous waters, or if you just get a contract agreement, contract or an employment agreement. And I think a really good way of thinking of this, a lot of you will have outsourced loan processes, and most of them are contractors to your business, right? And if you think about that relationship, they've got their own processes. They dictate how they put your files through the system. They dictate when their staff work on your files, when they don't work on their files. They're allowed to work for hundreds of other mortgage brokers as well, and that's a true independent contractor relationship. And just bear that in mind when you're thinking of hiring a broker, even if you decide to do it as an independent contractor. Do you want them to be able to exert that level of control that your loan processors or outsourced loan processors are exerting? Because if you are happy with that, it's okay to say that in general it should be okay. Yeah. But if you want more of that, no, you need to be in the office. This is what you need to work on day in and day out. This is the process I want you to follow. It's more than likely that you should be engaging them as an employee, not a contractor. So just keep that outsourced loan processor thing in mind, because I think you've all had experience with that. It's probably a good way to tell what's a real independent relationship and what's not.
Yeah, it's a really good analogy. And also, if you want them to represent your brand, that's the other point.
Yeah, absolutely. Have we got any questions up there, Simon? All right, we'll leave you with that today. Finance and Coffee. I'll post their details as well in the comments. Other than that, feel free to shoot through any questions. We might do up a quick Q&A as well. Go have a read of Joel's blog post on our website as well that goes through a lot of these distinctions. You can go check it out any time. And if you have posted a job or you're thinking of posting a job, please, we'll send you the details. Pick up the phone and give Joel a call. Don't fall into the trap. Don't get hit with a $10 million worth of settlement fine. Thanks, guys.